Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks so much. Smash like and subscribe to the Yoshi Archives as a part of this highlight clip. We're talking about Yoshi-P's 6.1 interview, his plans for the future, and the success of duty support with the fine team that runs the Yoshi Archives. Be sure to subscribe to them. Be sure to like this video if you guys like Final Fantasy XIV content, or like this video if you don't like Final Fantasy XIV content. Man, I'm going to let you choose either option. But guys, we're going to jump in. I want to get your perspective on this. Since the implementation of the duty support in 6.1, the number of new players starting the game has increased, which is, I honestly am not surprised by that, especially in Japan. People who are hesitant about the MMO genre are coming in because he still thinks there is potential for further growth into the Japanese market. He also says that he's happy with how much feedback the new players, saying that it's easier and more fun than they imagined. What do you guys feel about that, the duty support system, the MMO, and the single player game brushing up against each other?
I talked a bunch. Issa, and you want to go again?
Okay, so all I've got to say on this one is, duh. There are tons of people I know that really, really loved Final Fantasy that absolutely slept on 14 because they didn't want to have to deal with people. Add into the fact that it makes at least the early game, right, a whole lot easier when you're a DPS. It gets rid of that annoyance of the 15-minute queue. It makes a whole lot of sense to me that a whole bunch of people that are looking for more of that single player Final Fantasy experience are going to start coming in.
Yeah, I agree. I can name at least 5 or 6 friends I have that play 14 as a single player game almost already.
Yeah, I'm utterly not surprised, and even more than just not being surprised that it's boosted numbers, especially in Japan, where there's a lot of more reticence sometimes to play in social spaces. The fact to me is that I'm not worried about the long term. Like, I've seen people voice worrying about, oh, well, then people won't play together, and like, what's the point of it being an MMO? It's like, well, one, trials still exist, and two, the thing is, what I see, I've seen this happen already, is that people get it and that gets them in, and then they end up socializing and joining FCs, and like it boosts things. It doesn't end up like limiting things.
I think Fido brings up a valid point as well, that like part of this is how are they separating this information out, because they also, like, 6.1 was the first thing after 6.0. And during 6.0, they restricted character creation. They restricted game sales. So when both those things go away, they're like, wow, there's a lot more people coming in. Yes. Like, some of that is also like, when you literally said no new players, you got no new players. And so like some of that is just like, you're also just making it a better new player experience across the board, not just with this. But the story in particular is a weird thing, because if you have somebody who likes the multiplayer experience, they're like, cool, I'm going to hop in with my friends. We're all going to play. What do we do? Well, step one, you're going to have to play by yourself. Okay, that's not uncommon in games. That's even true in like Forza. I can't play with my friends for the first like little bit. No big deal. What is that? Like a couple hours tops? No big deal. Awesome. I got to the first dungeon. So now we can play together? Yeah. So we go into the first dungeon together. Then what? Well, you got to drop party and you got to go back and do a bunch more solo stuff. So you've pissed that group off. But then you say, okay, but that's fine. We'll talk to the single player group. I'm in this for story. I can play this as a single player game? Absolutely. 100%. Until you get to level 16. And then you have to find people. Well, I don't want to play with people. Sorry. So like the nice thing about this is the first time we've seen them allow either path to be pure. So like the one thing from my perspective is they've straddled that line where you were always, there was this argument of like, can it be played as a single player game? No, it can't. Like, you cannot clear the dungeons, the trials, the Crystal Tower is required. You can't. It's not a single player game because you cannot clear it single player. And this says, okay, well, now we can discuss that. It's the first time we've ever been able to discuss this as an option, especially because in 7.0, they said they want to go back and possibly add 8-man and even Crystal Tower support to the duty support system, which would truly let somebody be almost entirely solo if they wanted to. I think that's awesome. Let people play this game whatever way they want. As a counterpoint, though, how would you guys feel if they then also said, based on this popularity, should we go back and make a multiplayer version of the game where I can do MSQ in a group, where if I want to go in and beat up in a single player instance with 8 people, Does that really break anything if I want to like do the last fight of Endwalker with a friend?
You know, well, last fight. Okay.
I picked one that
Yeah.
as an example that I know would make people go, that doesn't work. Who cares?
No, but I'm always up for the discussion, right? Like my druthers on the situation, right? Is that to me totally underserves what that moment is supposed to be as a one person versus one person pinnacle. Like that is what that moment's supposed to be. That's narrative speaking. Now, mechanically though, is that better? It's like, well, here's the difficulty though, is like then you've got to retool Xenos' AI to make sense for a fight that's more than a single player mechanic, because a lot of his attacks are like relatively straightforward to dodge as a single individual, right? I mean, like, I guess at what point do you also say challenge is necessary in terms of the not like trials and dungeons, but to your point, the the instanced fights, because if it's not, then yeah, I guess the argument is go for it. I personally more prefer the idea of hybrid systems where it's like, okay, yeah, there are times where you're going to have moments alone to experience, like the same way that you can't read a book with a friend. Like you can both read the book and talk about the book. And I get that games are different, right? So you shouldn't apply the book logic. But like there's a part of me that viscerally is like, but like, isn't that kind of the intent though? But yeah, that's hard. That's hard. That balance is what they've been struggling with this whole time, right?
Twitch chat has provided the perfect solution to this. Get rid of the instance and Xenos altogether.
Just delete Xenos. Like we deleted him at the end of Endwalker.
It feels nuts to me that MSQ can't be a more shared experience.
Yeah.
That I can't say, I want to go into the New Game Plus. Cool. What chapter would you like to do in New Game Plus? Wherever Brian's at. I just got him into the game and I just want to play with him. Can you just sync it so that we're working on the same objectives together? Well,
Yes,
when you do solo
100%.
fights, you have to do those solo. That's fine. I'll go get a drink when I come back. Catch me up. But the fact that he has to go off and, talk to 6 people and pet 4 lambs and slay a bear, and I can't do that with him is ridiculous.
New Game Plus.
Stop making me drop group and stop making it hard for us to see each other's objectives. That's what I love about the solo. This is the first time they've said people who play differently are welcome here too. And I want that to my answer is not, okay, well, they shouldn't be allowed to play solo. No, it's okay, cool. Now let other people who also play differently get something as well.
Yeah, it's the hybrid that essentially I think that Final Fantasy XIV needs to address. And so as we jump into kind of some other points that he's making, this kind of ties into just my general feedback is that I love 5-man crystalline conflict. If they bring Feast back, I hope it's 5-man. While I'm not delusional, I would love them to go and put 5-man dungeon. And maybe Criterion ends up being kind of that fit. I think 5 is just a really good number, especially for an MMORPG in terms of balancing and getting people running through the system itself, especially like in the case of 14. But I don't see them redoing the old dungeons. However, all that being said is that when he looks at it's just the highlights, the feedback from Crystalline Conflict, removing role restrictions, thinking about bringing in like adventure plates for dungeons, like that's kind of the big, kind of like the thing that makes me excited. One of the things that I think adventure plates and what they have is that social aspect, but we need that hybrid, especially with the duty support system. Like what Chris talks about, like you're doing the single player fight, you got to drop party. Like I even brought that feedback up to Yoshi-P directly in the Fan Fest, and I was like, just give me the ability that when I'm playing with you, that I can level sync down to your level, so I don't have to like run behind you, party up for a fate, so we can play together and then disconnect. I think essentially there's a lot of 2-man out there, a lot of 3-mans out there. And ultimately then it's like, especially if you want to have that, like, hey, I'm having a really good solo experience, right? So we talk about those players coming in. Imagine it's like, hey, I got my spouse to come join me, but we really don't want to run this with other people because we're nervous. We're having that kind of frustration or that kind of like anxiety. Imagine be like, well, we're together. Let's just bring in 2 of the support people, or, and then all of a sudden that kind of solves that problem. And so you can still have a social experience while at the same time not necessarily having to interact with people that you don't want to. That actually would make it more advantageous for me to play with my kids, so as Maddie gets older and I kind of have her run around, she's created a character, and but we're not like actively like going out, and the fact the duty support system's there has me excited. because then she's not going to necessarily have to worry about absolutely being amazing at this game because she just doesn't have that level of interest yet. But I would really enjoy it if I was like, oh, I'm logged in and she's logged in and we're going to go run this dungeon together, and I can show her the ropes while sitting next to her, while at the same time, like, there with her, so to experience her exploration aspect of it, because she'll want to explore, right? She'll want to go to every nook and cranny, and running in with a group of people who are just trying to get it done isn't gonna work for them.
Yeah, there's no question. I think both of you guys are right in terms of you should be able to like 2 and 2, right? You should be able to new game plus. Let me go to a specific quest. What? Like, I get that you have it broken up into chunks, but you should just allow me to be like, I want to go to this quest in Shadowbringers. Heck, I just personally want that for me because it makes like getting footage of specific dialogue easier sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, I don't know about you guys, but one thing that I tend to take comfort in is that like I believe that the team's listening and trying to get there most of the time, which is usually when I get stressed with other dev teams, is that like it's like, well, there's just like, yeah, we want these things, but it's not going to happen. Whereas this is like, oh no, we could get there, especially with all the changes we've seen to MSQ the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, WoW, Pets of Warcraft says WoW will let you actually do the same kind of quest as your friends. When you leave the party, those quests vanish. And so they've got and WoW actually adapted from Final Fantasy XI in how it's got its level sync system worked. And in fact, we know we've got level sync already in the game. It just I'd like to see more hybrid, and that actually kind of tied into one of the things I didn't talk about in the new jobs is like I'd like to see some hybrid aspects of jobs at some point. Like they could expand the entire job system without even adding in a new job. You just kind of start thinking of like, well, we have these systems. What if we started to allow people to mix and match and do all these crazy weird concoctions? Now, I want to know, what do you guys think? Blue Mage Battle Royale PvP mode. Is that something that excites you, or is that something that has you a little bit concerned? What do you think?
That sounds fun. Like, as long as it's isolated, who cares? Like I'll go do that for, a couple times a week. Like, that's I'm not a huge Blue Mage person, but that does sound fun.
Fields of Cartano, make it happen.
Yeah, I'm not big on PvP, but I definitely play it.
I mean, that's like the definition of how the community got into Crystalline Conflict, right?
Yeah,
like I'm not big on PvP, but I'll play it. Like that's how we got here.
Well, the thing
Chris, I'll help you with
ahead.
Crystal Tower, but I've got one more match. Okay.
Yeah, just one more match. That's the thing that one of the things that when they talk about removing the role bindings for PvP, Chris and I said back like earlier on, I was like, they have to get rid of that because nobody wants to wait 30 plus minutes, especially because the role bindings didn't tell you what was needed. I was like, even if they keep the role bindings and say, listen, we need a healer. Hey, listen, we need a range. Like I just want to play PvP because and what that ended up doing is like, I just wouldn't play any other game that had PvP because, like you look at it right now, actually, I got some good news about Overwatch. They've canceled Overwatch 2 and they're bringing all that into Overwatch, like as it should have been from the start, because it just,
that's what the announcement was.
Yeah.
They're like, it's Overwatch 2, and all the people who wanted a sequel is great. And then like all the people who wanted it in, they're like, we're just gonna kind of carry it on. Then why'd you put a 2 on there?
Yeah.
You're just confusing people.
So and it's like, but at its core, it's like, all right, let's just, what I want to play this. And then these games are built for that. And so Final Fantasy XIV always kind of felt so restrictive. And then you saw tools have to build up. But I think what you see now is that if I want to play, I can queue and I'm not having to wait forever. I just want to play. I just want to get in. And that's actually a really good thing. It's quick, and it's remained quick with the exception when Black Mage became God mode. I read those patch notes for Black Mage before, and then Chris and I talked about it in a video. Like, why did we have an A patch? Like, we've never done that before. I don't know if we'll ever see another one like that again, because at the end of the day, I was like, I read those patch notes, and I was like, this is. I thought, and they're like, Black Mage isn't doing that good, so we had to boost it up. And I was like, every time I played Black Mage, I was like, I do really well. So it's like, it's a really, like, I always felt like it was like a really good job, but it clearly, like, it's got its challenges. And then they went and made those changes. I was like, those are insane. Like, that's going to make me just like freaking even destroy. And what it did make me, what happened was I just couldn't get a match because I was trying to queue as Black Mage and they only let you have one on each team. But it's like, yeah, Black Mage just became like OP AF. And that was just so funny. But
like, man, why wouldn't they just wait? And then they came out and they're like, man, that really didn't land well. We should have just waited. And it's like, well, who told you to put an A patch in?
Yeah.
Like
Devs got overeager.
It's like you ask a friend to come over for dinner at 7 and they show up at 6 and they're like, sorry, I'm gonna have to take a phone call. I wasn't ready to be here. I didn't tell you to be here. Like, why are you telling me?
Oh, it was just that, we're all learning here. It's like, so I guess the question is like, I'll be curious to see if we see any other additional A patches in the future. Now, the last thing kind of the interview, the last thing the kind of interview kind of focuses on is Ultimate. And so in here, it seems to confirm that obviously 6.3 is the next Ultimate. And then the question is that, we kind of speculate, are we actually going to get 3 Ultimates this expansion, being that we actually only got one last expansion to kind of offset that with the pandemic? What do you think about how they did Ultimate, especially how it relates to the lore with Heaven's Word? Did you guys watch the race at all? What do you think?
I think it was super cool. I think what they did was really fun and interesting, but also to my mind, because of how they've always treated the minstrel, was very in line with everything else we've seen. With what Ultimates and EX have always been. It's like, yeah, it's always been, hey, what if this musical man made a fan fiction of what you did? And so once they did what they did for this Ultimate, I was like, while this is more wild, it's still, that's not shocking. But it I think it was also really good to show the idea of like, hey, it's like this Tolkienian idea of it could have been different, but it couldn't have been better. And it's like, yeah, maybe Horsefall would have survived, but that might not have been for the best ultimately. So
I thought that what they did with it was really great. I don't think that it's something that we have any right to expect of them every time.
Nope.
If for some reason we do get 3 Ultimates and that becomes like a recurring thing, that's cool. I would only expect like maybe one of them to have that same kind of level in an expansion. And even that, I think it's only going to be one of those things of, oh my God, I've got this really cool idea. Whatever you do, don't tell Koji. He'll try to put a joke in it. But it was really, really cool getting to see that story play out. It was really awesome watching everybody do it and watching like everyone not actually doing the Ultimates reactions, because I don't know if you guys hopped into many of those streams while they were live, but all of the save him that kept going on was just great. So I think the Ultimates like that are really, really good for like these community effects, right? But it's definitely not something that I expect to see a lot of.
Yeah, I agree. They have to ration the sheer amount of effort they put into that, but it was exactly what I, as a player who's focused more on the lore, the character, the story, it's exactly what I wanted out of an Ultimate. So yeah, I was really happy to see it. I'm also a Horsefall stan, so
it makes you wonder if next is, do we do Warring Triad, or we go into like Omega and stuff? Because my question is, we have Ultimate, we already had Alexander, because there was no really like trial series in A Realm Reborn the same way that we start getting in Heaven's Word on.
Mm-hmm.
So like whether or not they do that, because the trial series was effectively part of Ultimate Weapons Refrain, right? So do we see the Warring Triad, especially with how important the Warring Triad is, especially because we're dealing with the Void of Mericidia potentially in the future? It's like that could be a really good time to make it an Ultimate and get attention on that. But at the same time, I could also imagine a world in which they skip over it.
I don't think we're getting 3. But as the resident pessimist of Work to Game, I don't think we're getting one in 6.3. And people are like, but you guys said. No, I repeated the roadmap, which said we're getting in 6.3. If you'll watch my coverage, I said I'll believe it when I see it. I just, knowing that we just now got our Shadowbringers second Ultimate, and I understand that the reasons were valid, it does not mean that the end result was any different. Some of the reasons are reasons that are not as prevalent now, but if you go back and watch dev panels on Ultimates, they have also talked about the fatigue it is on the development team and on the internal team. And so those reasons, as far as I know, haven't gone away. And so to ask a dev team, and if we don't get to this expansion, as far as I'm concerned, we are missing one.
Mhm.
So like we would have to get 3 for the mat and then go back to 2 every expansion because they said, oh, we're not cutting it, we're delaying it. I'm like, as far as I can tell, that's the same thing because we're still going to end up short one. And so, you know, just to kind of put that pessimist, I bet we're getting it in 6.5. It wouldn't make sense to release it alongside a Savage. I think we get it in 6.5. And I think the amount of Omega references, it makes sense for it to be Omega. I think Warren Triad was the leading theory prior to all of this Omega, you know, constant lore dump. I'm still King Mugamog all the way, just because, like, I said it to Happy when we were on State of the Realm, and he goes, "Do you just want to watch people suffer?" I was like, "I don't plan on clearing it. Yes, I just want to watch people suffer. Like, I'm not doing it. I'm here to watch. Let's just." So, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I'd love to be wrong. I'd love to be wrong and it being 6.3. I just don't see how a piece of content that's that expensive to build and develop can be ready that quickly.
I was shocked when they said 6.3. I was like, oh, 6.5. Wait, there's a 3 on the end of that? I was just like,
Yeah.
Why would you do that to yourself?
Why? I think at the end of the day, if they hit 6.3, I think I'm going to be really happy for the rating community because I think they were so hungry for so long. It's one of the things that it's like, like when you look at content and content creation, one of the things that's really big within the 14 community is watching people clear the story. And so it's like from a content creator's perspective, like you are incentive to be late so people can go and play the story and then they can come see how you react to it. But that is kind of the biggest pie. Like if you're going to say, here's the thing. And so lore content, like you said, it's a niche within a niche. Like, it's like, yeah, like you want, and people are like, oh, we want more of it. It's like, do you? like in terms of analytics, like maybe, you know, like, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. But then when it comes down to kind of the whole, you know, like the rating community, I was like, they were starving for a long time. They had the delay, they had the ultimate get kicked out. And then you start thinking about it, it was over a year between Savage raids. And now it looks like we're going to have a little bit, you know, smoother transition within the Endwalker series. And namely because I think they're giving them the 4 months, they're giving them a week off to rest. And I think that's important because I think what we'll end up seeing is like, yeah, at first it's going to feel like, you know, the train's slowing down a little bit, but I think in the long run, you'll actually see like, but the quality raised up, it got improved, and overall the player experience has been great.